Good. That's okay. Good.
Not the organ today. It'll come. Don't worry. Probably next week. 41? No. It's at the beginning of the book. Oh, 14, before? Yeah. Yeah, it's 4. Good morning.
Come on, let's have it.
Yes.
Get it off of him.
We just need to drop the. So, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester. We're now going to settle into a spirit of worship. First, by reminding you that the order of service is only a suggestion, and that the opening hymn is number 4, not number 41. And we may have some other changes too, so just follow along. We're going to invite you into a moment of quiet to be followed by the music of On the Blue Ridge by Joseph Martin, played by our music director, Matthew Johnson, and invite you to light a silent candle of joy or sorrow at this time.
Oh, shit.
Decide what you do and who you can be. If you start saying that, be bold and ask your opportunity. That's what you can.
Our chalice lighting words this morning are by the Reverend Michelle Collins. We light this chalice in honor of the families we build, the circles we choose, the bonds shaped by care. May this flame remind us that love is the tie that makes us kin.
So, what you just heard is what you're going to sing at the refrain. So, when they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. So you'll know when to come in. When I lift my voice, let it be fit song, a defiant mode in the face of wrong. I won't stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. When I lift my voice, let it be for good. Let me care as much as we know I should. I won't stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. When we lift our voice, let it be for good. Let me care as much as we know we should. We won't stand alone, we'll stand side by side, 'cause we know that love is always justified. When they try to divide us, it will only unite us. I lift my voice. I lift my voice. We lift our voice.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Worcester. My name is Aaron Payson. I'm honored to be one of the ministers of this congregation, a congregation of love, hope, and justice, inspiring people to take on the challenges of a changing world. We begin by acknowledging that in Worcester, Massachusetts, we work, learn, live, love, and worship on the seized ancestral homeland of the Nipmuc people who survive and remain active as the Nipmuc tribe. If you would like to learn more about the Nipmuc tribe, please feel free to take one of the pamphlets that's been provided by our Side of Love task force that helps us understand the depth of the statement that we have just shared. We offer a special welcome to those of you who are new or visiting with us for the first time this morning. We're delighted that you're here. We hope that you'll join us in Fellowship Hall following the service for refreshments and conversation. If you have questions or desire more information about this service or any of our ministries or programs in this congregation, please do not hesitate to ask. You will note that the pews are a bit more sparse this morning than they would normally be, and that is largely because a great number of our folk are communing with folk from First Unitarian on the beach in Saco, Maine, the last gasp of summer, if you will. And they're enjoying worship there as well this morning. So we send them all kinds of love, and we look forward to their return next week. For those of you who are joining us online this morning, we offer you a very special welcome. For safety purposes and so that we might come to know you better as you're able, please do put your name in your video feed. Please take a moment to sign one of the attendance clipboards that will be making their way around. Though you're not obligated to sign, we appreciate your information and will use them only for church purposes. During the service, we offer an opportunity to share a brief personal joy or sorrow. If you'd like yours to be read aloud by me, please print it on one of the index cards in the pew and drop it either in the collection plate when it comes around or hand it to me during this time in the service. These cards will be posted outside the minister's office to be shared with our friends at other services. For those of you who are online, you are welcome to place a joy or sorrow in the chat, and we will also share this during this time in the service. In the foyer, there are listening devices, large print orders of service, large print hymnals, and cushioned seats for those of you who desire that assistance. Please see one of our ushers who will be pleased to assist you. We now invite you to turn your technology to worship mode. And please note the announcements in the back of your order of service this morning. There will be time for short verbal announcements following our postlude. We are so glad that you are here and hope that this morning is an opportunity for rest, reflection, and rejuvenation. This time I'd like to invite Andrew Wilkin to come forward with our opening words.
The opening words are by Reverend Scott Taylor. Today we return to the shelter of each other. Today we return to the shelter of each other, to arms that hold us in the midst of the storm, to voices that help us hear our own, to hearts that accept us for who we are. May we be for each other a source of safety and sending. May we offer each other both comfort and challenge. May the belonging we find here help us offer the same experience of home to others. May this time of blessing begin.
Would you please turn in your gray hymnals to hymn number 4, and please note that the tune that is going to be played is the tune that those of us who grew up on Ferry Beach learned this song from, so I'm going to invite you to follow along. Please rise in body or in spirit. I brought my spirit to the... Here we go.
And actually, you can hear it.
There we go. I brought my spirit to the sea. I stood upon the shore. I gazed upon
And then there came a sense of peace, some whisper calmed my soul, some ancient ministry of stars that made my spirit whole. I brought my spirit to the trees that loomed against the sky. I touched each wandering, careless breeze to know if God was nigh. And then there fell an inner flame that fiercely burned my tears. Upward I was from bended knee to meet the answering ears.
Check 1, 2 on the mic. Excellent. Seeing that there are so many young people here today, oh, you know who you are. I thought a story for children of all ages seemed appropriate, and this one is a Chinese wisdom tale called Lord of the Cranes. There are places in China where the mountains reach all the way up to the clouds. High up on these mountains lived wise people. One was named Tian, which means heaven. There among the clouds lived Tian's friends, the cranes. Tian fed them and cared for them, and the birds told Tian of the wonders they had seen on their flights below. Tian was devoted to these birds, and they would do absolutely anything for him. One day, Tian decided that he wanted to go down to the city. He wanted to see if the people were remembering to be kind and generous. So the old man settled himself on the back of one of those beloved cranes and flew through the clouds. In the city, Tian met a beggar. Tian said, "Would you be willing to give me your clothes and take mine?" The beggar was taken aback. Oh, no, sir, no. Why would you give up your splendid robes for my torn rags?" "I've come," said Tian, "to test the people. No one must recognize me." And then the beggar understood, and Tian was no ordinary man, and gratefully agreed to exchange Tian his clothing. Tian blessed him and was on his way. Day after day, Tian went begging through the streets of the beautiful city, and many people passed him by and seemed not to notice him. Not a single person, not one, dropped a coin in Tian's cup. One evening, Tian arrived tired and hungry at a small inn, and Wang, the owner, welcomed him. "What can I do for you?" "Could you give me a little something to eat and drink?" asked Tian. I'm sorry, but I have no money." Wang smiled cheerfully and waved away the apology. "Sit, rest." Wang brought the old man a warm bowl of soup and rice and tea and a plate of sizzling meat. Tian's heart was full as his belly when he left that inn that evening. On the following evening, Tian stood again at Wang's door. "Please, could I have a sip of rice wine and a bite of food to eat?" "My pleasure," said Wang. "Don't worry about the cost." And Tian ate and drank once again, and smiled with thanks.
Good
From
morning.
then on, Tien came every day to Wang's Inn, where he was always welcome. Many months went by, and
Oh, how I
one
like
day
it.
Tien said to Wang, "I am so very deeply grateful to you
What do you get?
for
What
being
do you
so
get?
good to me.
Yeah.
I must find a way to repay you." Wang was quite surprised, "But you do not need to repay me. What I have given to you, I have given freely. It makes me happy when I can be with others and serve needs." "Nonetheless," said Tien, "I would like to repay you, and of course, I have no money, but I can give you something else." Tien then untied a gourd that was around his neck that looked like a water flask, but he used it almost like the finest sable brush. He went up to the wall in Wang's inn, and he began to cover the wall. And as he covered the wall, cranes began to form. And then, as they came into a brilliant color, they began to move and flap their wings and flutter about. Wang's eyes and mouth were both wide with astonishment. Tien said, "Let your guests be merry. And when you start singing and clapping, the cranes will dance." Tien turned to the door. "Wait, just who are you, good sir?" And Wang called out, and Tien just gave a friendly wave and disappeared. Soon everyone in the city was talking about the wandering, dancing cranes at Wang's Inn. More and more people came every day to marvel at the beautiful birds, and before long, Wang was one of the richest people in the city. But he always kept a seat free and a bowl of soup ready for anyone who wanted it. One day, Tien returned, and Wang hurried to greet him and sat him at the best table and brought him a delicious meal. Please, said Wang, "tell me who you are." Tien didn't answer. Instead, he lifted a flute to his lips, played a melody that was so beautiful and so tender that it brought tears to Wang's eyes. "That was a melody from heaven," whispered Wang. "I thank you for allowing me to hear it. You've made me rich and happy. How can I ever repay you?" "Teach others," said Wang. "Teach others to be generous to everyone. That is my only wish." Tien raised the flute to his lips and played the melody from heaven one more time, and then the three cranes stepped off the wall and knelt before him, and Tien stroked them and said, "Thank you for your help, my friends. We will fly home now." He bowed to Wang. "Farewell, my friend." Tien flew on the back of one of the cranes up and away from the city and into the sky toward the mountain, and the great flock of cranes accompanied them. Wang stood watching the sky long after Tien and the cranes had disappeared. At last he knew who the unusual beggar was. And deeply, deeply humbled, Wang returned to his inn. And for the rest of his life, Wang tried to fulfill the Lord of the Cranes' wish. Tell all who will listen of the miraculous encounter with the beggar in disguise, and urge them to share with those around them. I was 7 years old when I was diagnosed with Legg-Calvé-Perthes disease. For those of you who aren't familiar with the disease, it's a disease that causes the blood to stop flowing to the ball of one of your hip bones. And as that happens, the bones soften, and so the progress of the disease is to try to keep weight off of the ball of the hip bone in order that it not flatten while it's so soft. And then a third particular part of the disease is when that bone begins to reharden, and if it is flattened, it rehardens in the form of a mushroom that medical personnel call a magnococcus. 7 years old, and all of a sudden I found myself in a sling that kept my leg at a 45-degree angle from my knee back, walking on crutches. I was in second grade. Second grade is a very hard place to be when you're different from others. Shortly thereafter, I found myself in one of the most amazing contraptions I will ever have experienced in my life. It was a brace that came all the way up on my hip, and it ran a metal piece all the way down with a place at the knee to unlock it. And then at the bottom of it, there was a rubber stop and a cotter pin spring system that was kept my foot about 3 inches off the ground and put a 3-inch heel on the shoe of this other foot. The idea was to keep it from compressing, right? Except I was 7. And my mother, God love her, if she were still alive, would tell you the story about how my pediatrician, Dr. McSparron, came out of his office one day to hear this very shrill little voice calling to him from far above. Dr. McSparron, Dr. McSparron! And he looked up, and about 2 stories in the tree in front of the pediatrician's office, there was Aaron in his full glory and his brace, 2 stories up in a tree. And Dr. McSparron was saying, "How did you get up there?" Aaron said, "How do you think?" Then he watched me climb down and hit the ground, all the while shaking his head. "You shouldn't be doing that," he said. "Yeah, well," wandered off. That summer, I was diagnosed with having a hip that had been displaced. I wonder why. And I spent a summer in a body cast after the hip had been surgically replaced, or, put back together. And after that, I had another small surgery that took the pin out that had been put in to hold it in place, and was put in what they call a Petri cast, which is casting from your hips all the way down to your ankles, and then casting a yardstick between the two and keeping you at an angle like this. So I spent the better part of 4 months in a wheelchair. Well, that's not true. About a half dozen times, my parents had to take me back to have the cast repaired because I had gotten out of the wheelchair and started to do this down the sidewalk and just crushed both sides of the cast because I was 7. Actually, I was probably 8 then. It was about this period of time when we spent the summers in New York State at my mother's family homestead, which my parents owned at the time, out in the middle of the country where, we're talking about the 70s, right? You left the house at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you came home when you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, right? But I had been laid up, and so I was bored. And I was 8. And my mother had kept encouraging me to read. Now, I love to read. In fact, I'm a bibliophile. I collect books much to the consternation of my family, right? Because That's part of what has drawn me into my profession. But at 8, not so much. She shoved a book in my hand and she said, "I think you would enjoy this book. Jonathan Livingston Seagull." And I went, "All right." And I plopped myself in my father's chair in the middle of one very hot summer afternoon, and I began to read. Began to read about a gull that was very frustrated with his existence. Gull that was very frustrated that he couldn't figure out how to go beyond the limitations that he had set for himself or that had been set for him, limitations that seemed more physical and mental than anything else, and family who was encouraging him to just be a gull. Fly to eat. Why must you always challenge yourself to do things beyond your present capacity? And Jonathan's response is, there's got to be more to this than flying to eat. I want to learn how to fly. I want to do this my own way. I want to figure out what my purpose is and what the purpose is for living itself. Now, the 1970s was a remarkable time for religion in general and the occult in particular. We were, for the first time, really engaged in a variety of activities on a much larger scale that were beginning to challenge the mores of the mainstream religious institutions that had occupied the center of our civic life for so long. And one might accredit it to television, might accredit it to the plethora of books, but I know that, for instance, my father in the early 70s was off at places like Star Island. The summer that I was in my body cast, he took my brother to Star Island in order for my father to spend the week teaching people how to do transcendental meditation. At the end of the week, during their talent show, he was greeted by a class of people that were intoning TM in the AM means BM in the PM, all right? He very much engaged, both my parents, very much engaged this culture of inner exploration, inner contemplation, the ability to come to know oneself as deep as possible, and it was very much on the outskirts, even of Unitarian Universalism at the time. The idea that one might do guided meditation was anathema in most circles. And now, if you look at almost any curricula by the UUA, guided meditation is a primary means of introducing most topics. But at the time, it was very much aligned with those who were way far out. So reading Jonathan Livingston Seagull was in some ways right up my alley because I lived in this world with my parents. But more to the point, I felt in Jonathan a kinship. Someone who had broken free of the constraints that had been placed on him by a culture, by community, by himself. And it's a fascinating turn in the story because he comes to a moment of absolute exasperation where he's been doing these dives from thousands and thousands of feet in the air, and he would get to a certain point and he would twist his wings and try to roll out of it, and he would end up tumbling into the sea. And there's this moment in Jonathan Livingston Seagull where essentially he says, "I'm done. You know what? I realize now that my parents were right, the community's right. Gulls are only meant to fly in order to eat. I'm not like a falcon who can turn his wings very slightly and so forth. I'm not like this." And he starts to head towards shore. He's very exasperated with himself. He's despondent. He's disappointed. And all of a sudden, he has this epiphany. Falcons. falcons don't use their whole wings. They just use the tips. What if I pulled my wings all the way in and just used the feather at the edge? It took a radical moment of extreme disappointment to awaken in him a truth that had evaded him because he was not able to confront disappointment itself. And it was out of that awareness that he was able to come to a truth that caused him to immediately soar to, what was it, 24,000 feet in the air, some absurd amount for a gull, and to roll over and start to dive till he got to terminal velocity, which, if I remember correctly, was 214 miles an hour. The engineers in the room could tell me different, but that was about what I remember in the thing. And then he rolled over and he discovered in himself a power that he hitherto didn't understand, a power that had been energized by disappointment. The rest of the story is about him coming to terms with a community who didn't understand him either. And as one who had spent a few years in everything from a brace to a sling to a brace to a body cast to a wheelchair, I come to understand that most people look at those who are not as physically able as the rest of the world as though they are irreparably damaged. I was so wigged out by the fact that when I rolled around in my wheelchair, it was apparent that most people felt I couldn't hear. Most people felt I couldn't understand them, so they spoke very slowly. And that somehow there was something incredibly wrong with me because I didn't operate in the world like them. And maybe the most profound truth of that time in my life was this, that I learned that people do not tease out of anger, they tease out of ignorance. I learned to let go of all of the, all of the sideline conversations that I got from many peers. I had a few very close friends who didn't do that, and that taught me equally well about what it meant to be in the world. So I finished Jonathan Livingston Seagull, much to my own consternation that my mother had made me read it. And it stayed with me for years. Something of a kinship with someone who understood what it meant to be different and to learn to rely on one's own capacity. Richard Bach, the author of Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and it was published in 1970. In 2012, Richard Bach, who was a pilot, crashed his plane on the island of San Juan off the coast of Washington. He clipped wires as he was coming in to land at Friday Harbor there. And the plane turned over and landed on its roof, and he was critically injured and comatose for a number of days. 2 years later, 2014, Bach amends Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and I did not know this until I went back looking at it. Amends Jonathan Livingston Seagull with a fourth section to carry the story of Jonathan Livingston Seagull beyond the moment of awareness on the part of certain numbers of seagulls about the special nature of Jonathan and their own potential because of it. It's a fascinating addition, almost a spiritual epilogue. Years after Jonathan's departure, the flock evolves into this very strange mix of gulls who embrace his teachings, perform daring aerial maneuvers, while others cling to old habits and flying only to fish. And Jonathan's message spreads thanks to some of the gulls that had decided to accompany him, including and especially Fletcher and the other quote-unquote disciples of Jonathan early on.
Thanks.
Teaching freedom through flight. And there were, to be sure, many gulls who had learned to transcend their own physical limits and vanish into higher realms, and echoed Jonathan's own journey. And then section 4 says this: it was a golden age for a while. Crowds of Gauls elbowed in upon Fletcher to touch the one who had touched Jonathan Livingston, seagull, a bird they now considered divine. In vain did Fletcher insist that Jonathan had only been a Gaul like them, who had learned as they all had learned. They were after him constantly to hear Jonathan's exact words, his precise gestures, to find tiny details about him. The more they begged for trivia, the more uneasy grew Fletcher, Gaul. When once they had been interested in practicing the message, training and flying fast and free and glorious in the sky, now they began to slack away from difficult work and became ever so slightly wide-eyed over legends of Jonathan, as though he were an idol of a fan club. Gull, Fletcher, they asked, did the magnificent Jonathan say, "We are the truth of ideas of the great Gaul," or was it, "We are, in fact, the ideas of the great Gaul"? Please, call me Fletcher. Just Fletcher Seagull, he would reply. Appalled, they would use the term of reverence upon him. And what difference does it make which word he used? Both are correct. We are ideas of the great Gaul. But he knew that they weren't satisfied with his answer, and they thought he had dodged their question. Gull Fletcher, when the divine Gaul Jonathan rose to fly, did he move one step toward the wind or two? Before he could correct the one question, another was fired. Gull Fletcher, did the sacred Gaul Jonathan have gray eyes or gold eyes? The questioner, a bird with gray eyes, was in anguish for only one answer. I don't know. Forget his eyes. He had purple eyes. How can that matter? What he came to tell us was that we can fly if we would just wake up and stop standing around on the beach talking about the color of somebody's eyes. Now watch, and I'll show you a pinwheel turn. But more than one Gaul, finding it wearying to practice something as difficult as a pinwheel, flew home musing, the great one has purple eyes, not like my eyes, not like the eyes of any Gaul that ever lived. The class has changed, writes Bach, with years from wide-soaring poems in flight to hushed talk about Jonathan before and after practice, to long involved recitations on the sand about the divine one, with no flying ever done by anyone. Fletcher and the other students of Jonathan were at turns puzzled and correctful and firm and furious at the change. But they were helpless to stop it. They were honored, and worse, revered, but they were no longer heard. And the birds who practiced flying were fewer and fewer. I love that fourth section. For anyone of you who have studied the sociology of religion, it is the exact kind of analysis that occurs in any religious tradition after the founding by a charismatic leader into the second, third, fourth generations, where it's no longer about the truth of what was expressed. It is about the idolization of the one who expressed it. It is no longer about practicing those truths. It is about revering the one who embodied those truths in a divine fashion. And if I had to say what the difference between Unitarian Universalism is for me and other traditions that it encounters, especially the traditions out of which Unitarianism and Universalist comes, which is moderate Christianity, I would say that at each turn, Unitarian Universalists and Unitarian Universalists have critiqued that out of which they have come as being idolatrous, as being the step away from the actual practice. Think about people like Emerson. I love when people come to me to talk about Ralph Waldo Emerson because they come to me most of the time out of an introduction to Emerson as a literary figure out of the 19th century, someone whom they have read. Far too few of them understand that Emerson and the Transcendentalist movement were fundamentally a religious tirade against moderate Unitarianism at the time, and was preaching a message that fundamentally said, your God is way too small. You think that God is something that is confined to these biblical scriptures. You do not understand the power and potential of awakening to that divine spirit in nature fundamentally, in other beings fundamentally. It is not about reverencing the past that brings you closer to the divine. It is about awakening to the divine in every moment of your existence, in every person that you meet, in the potential of every environment to teach you something about yourself and about the world around you and about others. I've been thinking a lot about that this week, especially following the death of Charlie Kirk, which I know has been on the minds of many of you who have been absorbed in the media frenzy and social media frenzy that has followed the killing of Charlie Kirk in Utah. And where I have come has been a slow process. My immediate response is Charlie Kirk should never have died, should never have been killed. It's a tragedy, and it is fundamentally anathema to the way in which I believe faithful people ought to operate in the world. We do not take the life of another person because we disagree with them. And I couldn't have disagreed with Charlie Kirk more. I spent most of my youth learning how to engage in intellectual combat. I was a debater all the way through high school. I could chew on the best of them. But it was shortly after coming into college that I learned that debate is not fundamentally a means of bringing about a difference in the world. It's not even an exchange of ideas. It's really about winning a point. And if you read turning points like little sub-motto, prove me wrong, it's also not about the truth, it's about him. And so I've been thinking a lot this week about what it is that needs to happen in order for us to transcend this notion that somehow we're just about the exchange of ideas. And I've gone back to reviewing material on rhetoric so that I can come to a deeper awareness of the things that I learned early on about the way in which words are used in order to be able to malign, to degrade, to marginalize, and to be able to elevate certain people and certain ideas. Malign, degrade, demoralize, marginalize with words. Oh, and by the way, this is a Christian movement. More and more, I'm coming to understand that fourth section of Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which is more about identifying with something than about practicing it. So I come today revisiting this old story that has meant so much in my life, at a moment in my life where I am no longer able to say, oh, my hip. I'm defined by this thing that happened to me. I am confined by this thing that happened to me. And I don't yet know what that means. I do know that I have spent the last 3 weeks confusing my wife. because now I walk without a limp and she does not recognize it, and it freaks her out. What's that? I understand. But I also understand that the difference it's made. And I think I understand a little bit of what Richard Bach went through when he had this life-changing experience that brought him back to this particular work for which he was so well known and caused him to actually add to it. Something about confronting one's own mortality or potential that brings one back to the meditation on what is it exactly that confines me to this instead of opening me up to other possibilities. And I offer the same to you. As you think about what's transpired over the last week or the last 3 months or what's coming on, what confines you? What would it take for you to let go and to practice flying? Amen. And blessed be. We come to that time in our service when we're given the opportunity to share that which is deep within us and symbolic of our own efforts, symbolic of the way in which we earn what we earn in the world, but more to the point, gives us the opportunity to contribute in a particular way to the ongoing mission and ministry of so much else. And in this case, the mission and ministry of this congregation. And so we offer people an opportunity to contribute part of that which is symbolic of their own efforts in the form of a weekly offering. If you would like to contribute using your digital devices, you're welcome to text 508-231-5335 and follow the instructions on your screen. At this time, the morning offering will be received. We now come to that time in our service when we're given pause to consider what is deepest in our hearts and most profoundly on our minds or in the work of our hands, in the days that have transpired or in prospect of days to come. Joys and sorrows that touch us deeply and are given another measure of meaning because of our capacity to share them in the midst of a company that claims us as a co-journeyer. So I invite those of you who have joys or sorrows this morning to come forward and form lines on either side of the sanctuary, to come and speak briefly into the microphone, telling us first who you are, so that those using our auditory enhancement devices might also participate in this important ritual, and to light a candle of joy or sorrow if you desire. Again, for those of you online, you're welcome to place your joy or sorrow in the chat, though it will also be read at this time. Are there joys or sorrows to be shared this day? I will begin by sharing with you what Beth Posner Waldron has written this morning. My sister spent a summer in a body cast recovering from surgery on her back, one of the many surgeries she had while we were growing up. Nadine missed getting the polio vaccine in 1955 when she was 3 and instead got polio. She used to walk with crutches and now uses an electric wheelchair with arms and legs affected by the disease. Now at 73, she just completed a round trip by car from Maryland to Alaska with her husband, daughter, and her granddaughter, evidence that she does not let her post-polio status limit her, if at all possible. But it's not been an easy life, and this is why I'm infuriated when RFK Jr. wants to interfere with people, particularly children, getting their vaccines and other preventive care.
One of the other deaths of this past week was of a fellow named Mark Volman. Mark Volman was one of the founders of the Turtles, which was, I'm sorry to be eccentric, but it was one of the groups that I loved as a boy. And he went on to sing with an even more eccentric group called the Fluorescent Leech and Eddie, Flo and Eddie, which was one of my favorite groups of all time. And so I'm going to light a candle for Mark Volman.
I learn something new about Matt every day. This from Dawn Dowd online. I'm at home today, continuing to sort through family photographs and negatives, thinking about the family stories and how to share those when we memorialize Mom this coming Friday. I'm tired and sad. I'm grateful knowing that sadness is born from loving and that loving continues. And from Cheryl Lachey, I'm grateful to be celebrating the birth of my son, who made me a mother and Bruce a father 42 years ago today. Happy birthday, Eric.
Hello, I'm Paul, as you know. And today's sermon was, or reflection, was pretty inspiring for me, because one things I came across was, one things I got out of it is that, like, knowledge is always there. We just have to find it, And that happened with me several times, because I found out that I didn't realize that some people were not my friends, shall we say, as they pretended to be my friends. And I didn't realize how stubborn I was, or whatever it cost. But nevertheless, it was a joy to, to come to that realization. And let's see, today and next, was it Sunday? I'll bring it up because I might be away. My uncle passed away on September 16th. He was kind of like my second father, because my father was, although he was there, he wasn't. I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but he was really a great guy. And that, well, I could expand more, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to take up too much time.
Hi, my name is Debbie Merrill, and I came up here last spring and was sharing my concern about my elderly mother. A lot has changed since then. My stepfather passed away, and it became an emergency as to what would happen with my mom. I was able to find a nursing home for her that didn't have the word nursing home in its name. And so I emphasized that it was a health and rehab center. Unfortunately, the very first day she was there, her roommate told her that it was a nursing home, and she hasn't forgiven me about that, but she does admit that she's doing very well where she is. But it's been a real struggle, and I've learned a lot more about dementia and what lies ahead, and I'm glad to have the support of this community. Thank you.
My name is Lynn Swain, and I have a heart full of joy because I spent the last 2 days taking my 90-year-old mother back to historic Deerfield, where she had been a guide for 50 years, to an intellectual forum about fashion and clothing history, which was one of my avocations for many years. And to be able to share that time, to bring her back to places where she had some old colleagues who acknowledged her, to share that love of history with her, and to help her understand that after three breaks of her right hip, it's okay to use a walker in public, and get her over the shame of being disabled, was really wonderful. We had a fabulous time together at 90 and almost 90 3/4. I know there won't be many more times like that, so I'm really grateful for the time that I spent with her.
Thank you. You do your thing, you're good.
This is my first time coming up here to do this. My name is Peggy, and I have a joy about something about getting older, because we're all doing it. And that is, I have 13 grandchildren, and the first one who's found someone they want to spend their rest of their life with and get married has just announced they're getting married in December. So that's wahoo. But then thank you, another good thing about aging is I've signed up to go with the Holden Senior Citizen Center on a bus trip to Lake George, New York next weekend. So I'll miss you all. I'll think about you. For the balloon festival, the hot air balloon festival. So keep doing it, right? Age is just a number, right? Thank you. And I'll bring back pictures too.
I have no doubt that what Peg didn't tell us is that she's going up in one of those balloons and going to skydive back. Noe Bono writes that she is sitting next to her dad at home, who has the dog on his lap, listening, and she is so very grateful to have days with her dad. So, let us be in the spirit of prayer and meditation. What? No, there isn't. We're good. Spirit of life, source of our innermost being, we're grateful today for the opportunity of this time of togetherness, remembering those who have gone before us, remembering ourselves evolving through the ages, and being grateful for each opportunity that ages have brought us. Help us hold tenderly the memory of those who continue to inspire our own being. Help us remember the deep connections we have even at distances. Let us be inspired not by that limitation which is set upon us by culture or by our own way of thinking, but to remain open to possibility, that we are more than we ever considered, and that we have the capacity to be present in ways that bring new life, not only to ourselves, but to those we love and the world we serve. For all of us, and for so much more that has gone unsaid but is no less important and real, we give great and abiding thanks. Amen, and blessed be. Would you please turn in your gray hymnals to number 519. The words of Rabindranath Tagore. Let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers. Let me not beg for the stilling of my pain. Let me not look for allies in life's battlefield. Let me not crave an anxious fear to be saved. Grant me that I may not be a coward, feeling your mercy and my success alone. Would you please join together in our closing hymn number 1007, found in your teal hymnals.
There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my
The last word for me today on the subject of revisiting Jonathan comes from our Universalist forebear Clinton Lee Scott, who says it's always easier to pay homage to prophets than to heed the direction of their wisdom and their vision. My friend and colleague Tess Baumgardner writes, "May you know that while your brokenness is compelling and real, it is only a fragment of your totality. It does not define you and need not limit you. May it and you find healing in community. May you know that I see God in you, and I pray that you manifest that divinity in many ways, small and large, and that even if you can't right now, that sanctity remains as a resource and as a strength. May you know that you are beautiful. May you know that you are good. May you know that you are loved. Amen. And blessed be. Please be seated. That was so good, my stole went, tie-dye. And if you look down, most of you are wearing bell-bottom jeans right now. Are there any short announcements? Seeing none, let us partake of our friendship, fellowship, and refreshment together this time.